Do you know the biggest mistake which we do while preparing for our examination? That the biggest mistake is revising our subject in the Hindi language. Students, as we all know that we are going to write our examination in English, so it is better to revise your subject in English so that your mind will catch those words. Welcome to the Ayushi Bansal classes, students. From today, we are going to start the revision of taxation subject, that is GST as well as income tax in the English language only. Yes, and if you are having any query regarding any topic, any kind of query you have, so you can write in the comment section also. Okay, so let's start the revision with the most important section number of GST, that is section number 7. Now, we know that this is the basics of the GST, section number 7, because it tells that it describes about the scope of supply. Now we all know that the taxable event under GST is supply of goods or services. Yes or no? Yes. But now the question comes that if we are okay, you are saying that if any person is going to supply any kind of goods or services to another person, so it will attract GST. But if I give any kind of pen or pencil to my friend, it means I am supplying that good to my friend. So then why there is no GST? So today we are going to understand all those concepts that on which part GST will be levied or on which part GST will not be levied. Okay, so I hope you all are very excited to start your revision of the section number 7. Now student, in the section number 7, it describes that section 7 contains two parts. In the first part, here is an inclusion, that which particular points will be included in the scope of supply. It means on which supplies GST will be levied. And the second is the exclusion. It means on which supplies GST will not be levied. It means it is excluded from the part of the GST. Okay. So now students, first of all, the inclusion part, it means from where the GST, on which part the GST will be levied is if there is any kind of supply, if there is any kind of supply which is done with the consideration. Now you all must remember that I have told you in the classes also that in the supply under GST, there are three basic parameters of supply. If those parameters are satisfied, so it will be a supply under GST. If those parameters will not be satisfied, so there will be no GST for that supply. Now let's talk about those parameters. Now student, those three parameters were, first of all, supply must be made of a goods or services, of any kinds of goods or services. Now it is obvious that if there is no goods or services, it means if there is no G or S, so there will be no T. Okay. Second is that supply must be made for the consideration. It means consideration means something in return of something. Okay, that is something in lieu of something. So supply must not be made in free. It must be made for a consideration. Now the consideration can be either monetary consideration or non-monetary consideration. It will not affect the scope of supply. Okay. So supply must be made for consideration. The third part is that the supply must be made in the course or furtherance of business. It means if it is done at the personal level, so no GST shall be attracted. Supply must be made in the course or furtherance of business. And yes, students, one more important thing, ma'am, which book should we refer? So student, at this particular time when your examinations are so near, so I will suggest you do not change your book. Okay, until and unless there is a strong reason for that, do not change your book. This is a law. So in every book, these points have been mentioned. So just don't worry about that. Okay. So in the course or furtherance of business. Now, what do you mean by the course or furtherance course of business, and what do you mean by the furtherance of business? Course of business means that it is the operating activity of the business, and furtherance of business means that this supply is necessary to run the business or the profession. Okay, yes. So now students, now let's come on the section number 7, inclusion. The first part in the inclusion point is that supply with consideration. Supply with consideration. If a supply is made with consideration, that too in the course or furtherance of business, so it will be considered as supply under GST. It will be included in the scope of supply. Second part which will come under this category is if students, there is an importation of services. Now this is very important. I will explain you this point. Now first of all, let's discuss about it. If there is an importation of services, importation of services, for which part? If there is an importation of services with consideration, whether or not in the course or furtherance of business. Now students, I have already explained you these things in the regular classes also. Now let's discuss about this too in the revision classes. Students, the first parameter, there is no exception of first parameter, because if there is no G or S, there will be no T. But yes, there is an exception of the second parameter. There are 4 exceptions we have covered in the schedule number 1, and there is only single exception of the third parameter, that is in the course or furtherance of business. There is a single point in which they are saying that if this is the supply and either there will be it has been done in the course or furtherance of business or not, it will not affect the GST character. Okay, so what is that supply, which is the only single exception of the third parameter? So that is importation of services with consideration, either in the course or furtherance of business or not. It means if there is a importation of services, importation means that you are receiving the services from the foreign country, from outside the national boundaries. So if there is an importation of services plus it has been done for the consideration, so if these two parameters have been satisfied, so with whether the third parameter is satisfied or not, it will not affect the essential character of GST. Okay, yes. So is this point also applicable for the goods? No, this point is applicable only and only for the services part. Okay, yes. Now the next is, ma'am, what now you must be thinking that, ma'am, what are the exceptions of this point, that a supply must be made for a consideration, but there are particular supplies which either made for consideration or not, it will not affect the character of GST. So yes student, that is schedule number 1. So third point which will be covered in the inclusion part is schedule number 1. Schedule 1 is deemed supply. It means if the supply is made without consideration, so and if it is covered under the schedule 1 of the CGST Act, so it will be considered as supply under GST. Okay. Now in schedule number 1, how many activities we are going to cover? 4 activities. Okay, yes, we will cover it in the same section also. Okay, yes. Now the next point is that in the inclusion part, one more will be covered. So students, there are some activities which we got confused that either to treat it as supply of goods or either to treat it as supply of services. Let's take an example. For example students, if we go to a restaurant, we just got confused. Why we got confused? In ordering any dish? No, that is not the confusion here. The confusion is that the restaurant is providing us food, which means the restaurant is providing us goods, and the second, that the restaurant is providing their services. For example, the waiter comes and serves the food. There is a particular furniture on which we can sit and relax. So they are, it means they are providing us services also. Okay, so in these kind of cases, when they said that that we got confused that either it is to be considered as supply of goods or services, there is a particular schedule number 2, which clearly specifies that these activities are to be treated either as supply of goods or supply of services. Which schedule it is? Schedule number 2. Okay, so the fourth point which we will cover in the inclusion part shall be the schedule number 2. Now the point comes for the exclusion part. So students, the activities which will be outside the purview of GST shall be mentioned in the schedule number 3. Yes, in our syllabus of GST, there are 3 schedules which we are going to cover: schedule 1, schedule 2 and schedule 3. Okay, so in the schedule 3, they have mentioned the services which are outside the ambit of GST. It means schedule 3 contains a negative list. Okay, yes, okay, great student. So now let's start with the first point. It means the supply with consideration, supply for consideration in the course or furtherance of business. So students, please always remember that there are particular 3 parameters. There are 3 basic parameters of supply. First of all, it must be the supply of goods or services. In the second case, the supply must be made for the consideration, and the third case is that the supply must be made in the course or furtherance of business. Actually, the schedule number 3 specifies those activities. It means a negative list specifies those activities which are neither to be treated as supply of goods nor as supply of services. Okay, so it means the activities which have been covered in the schedule number 3 will not attract GST. Okay, now students, let's start with the second point. I have mentioned here the second point, that is importation of services with the consideration. Now student, this point specifies the exception of the third parameter, And please like this video, share this video with your friends, and if you are actually liking this video, please tell me in the comment section also. Okay, so exception of the third parameter. What is the third parameter? Third parameter is that supply must be made either in the course of business or in the furtherance of business. But but there is an exception which specifies that if the supply is made for the importation of services, it must be made of the importation of services. And if the consideration has been paid, so either it is in the course of furtherance of business, it will attract GST. Okay, now the next point. Which is the next point, students? The next is the schedule number 1, that is the 4 activities. So students, there are high chances that you will get one question from the schedule number 1. Yes. Okay, maximum time there is a question in the examination from the schedule number 1. So let's talk about it. Now student, in the schedule number 1, there are particularly 4 activities on which even if there is no consideration, the GST will be attracted. Now let's understand those 4 activities. Schedule number 1. Okay, now what are those 4 activities? So the very first activity which we are going to cover is the permanent transfer or disposal of business asset. What is that activity? Permanent transfer or disposal of business assets. Disposal of business assets. Now students, they are saying, first of all, there is no definition of business assets in the GST, so we take a business asset as a simple dictionary meaning, that the assets which are linked with the business. Okay, so those are the business assets. They said that if you are having any business asset and you are permanently transferring, it means you have no intention to getting it back to with you. Okay, so if you are permanently transferring that asset, and that too without any kind of consideration, you are saying that you are transferring your business asset without consideration, but there is some kind of misambiguity. Why are you doing that? So the GST department said that as per schedule number 1, if you have the important condition, the decisive character here is if you have avail the input tax credit on this asset. It means when you have purchased those that asset, you have paid the GST to for purchasing, and if you have taken the credit of those, that GST part, that is the ITC, input tax credit. So if you have availed that ITC that time, so now either it is done for the consideration, that supply is done for the consideration or not, it will consider as supply under GST. Okay, so what is the key point here? That the ITC must have been availed. If ITC not have been availed, so there will be no GST in this particular part. Okay, second point. Second is, students, that the supply must be made between the related or distinct persons. We have done so many times that who is the related person or who is the distinct person. So just revise it all. In the case of related person, legal related person will also be included. Okay, and yes, the family, the employer employee, the partners, the officers, the directors of each other, all those points will be included here. Okay, now what is a distinct person? Distinct person means that if any person has taken the GST registration, the one person has a one permanent account number now, and we know that the GST is state wise. So if the person is having GST in one state and now the person is getting the GST registration in another state with obviously with the same PAN, so for those two particular state, that person will be known as distinct person. Okay, so now the next point is supply must be made between the distinct or related person. Now they are saying that there is a high chance of an influence here, there is a high chance of getting any scam here. So they said that if there is any kind of supply made between related or distinct person and that supply is made without any kind of consideration, even in that case that will be considered as supply under GST. So this is the second exception of the point consideration, that is supply without consideration. Okay, now students, please remember one thing, that there is a difference between the distinct person and the establishment of distinct person. Both will be covered in that point, that is the point number 2. But what is the main difference between the distinct person and the establishment of distinct person? Let's understand it. Okay, or I can say let's revise it. In the case of distinct person, person will be known as distinct only if the person has taken the registration in more than one state with the same permanent account number. But in the case of establishment of distinct person, if the person is having registration in one state, say Haryana, and he or she is having a business here, and they have started a business in Maharashtra, but in that but there they are doing any kind of non-taxable supply for which they are not required to take the registration. So even in that case, if they are non-registered person, these establishments will known as establishment of distinct person. This is the key point here. Okay, yes. Now the third point, let's talk about the third point. Now student, the third point, that is a para 3 of schedule 1, is if the supply is made, if the supply is made between principal and agent. Yes, if there is any kind of supply made between the principal and agent, and that too without the consideration, so that will be considered as supply under GST. But yes, there are certain points for it. Let's revise it. Okay, so students, in the case of principal and agent, what we expect? That we expect is, normally we expect that if there is actually a relationship of principal and agent in this case, for example, say Mr. A is a principal here, or Mr. P is a principal here, okay, and he is having an agent named as A. Now, that person, now there is a buyer, Mr. B, okay. Principal, that is Mr. P, said to Mr. Agent, Mr. Agent, do one thing, I have 100 sets of TV. Okay, let's sell it to any kind of buyer. Just watch out for the buyers, prospective buyers, and sell it out. Okay. Now, what you are expecting, if there is actually a relationship of principal and agent here, that the principal will send those TVs to agent, and agent will search out the prospective buyer and will sell those TV to buyer. Now, the important question, that on invoice, that is on bill, whose name should be mentioned as a seller? The agent or the principal? Obviously the principal, because the actual seller is the principal only, not the agent. Agent is just the mediator. But if on the invoice agent mentions his name, so we will consider it as that the supply made between the principal to agent shall also be considered as supply under GST. Okay, why? Because if actually the agent is mentioning the name as the seller in the invoice, so it means there is a kind of sale in this thing, which they are not showing in the GST law. Okay, now the same thing, that is a reversal case, will also be applied in the case of buying anything. If it means, if principal said to agent that buy something for me, and in the invoice if agent mentioned his or her own name, so it will be considered as para 3 condition, that is supply made without consideration, but yes, supply under GST. Okay, I hope the all things get revolved in your mind, that yes, we have covered it in our class also. Now the next point is fourth point. The fourth point is very, very, very important, okay, for the MCQ purpose too. That is para number 4 of schedule number 1. Now there is a case of para number 4 of schedule number 1. Now what is the para number 4 is saying? The para number 4 is saying about the importation of services. Now you might be thinking that, ma'am, we have covered the importation of services now. Yes, students, we have covered the importation of services, but we have covered that importation for the exception of in the course or furtherance of business. But this is the exception of supply with consideration. Okay, so let's do it. Students, in this part they said that if there is an importation of services, now there is no consideration, but yes, there is a supply of goods or services. Particularly for services, this para number 4 will happen, not for the goods. Okay, yes. So if there is an importation of services which is having no consideration, but yes, the third parameter has been satisfied here, that it is made in the course or furtherance of business. And yes, here it is an important key factor, that if the importation have been done from any related or any kind of related person. So if the person if the person who is the exporter, it means from where we have imported the services, is a related person and we have not paid anything to us, but yes, this is made in the course or furtherance of business, so it will be considered as supply under GST, that is a deemed supply. So this is the complete schedule number 1 which we have covered. I hope you all have revised it so well. So students, please, if you have not liked the video yet, please like the video. Tell me in the comment section that how much you are enjoying the revision class. Now let's talk about the schedule number 2, that is the schedule number 2 of the CGST. But before starting the revision of the schedule number 2, students, please keep it in your mind that importation of services have two different perspectives. In the case of exception of with consideration and in the case of exception of with in the course of furtherance of business. In the case of consideration exception, it is important that must be done from the related person, but it is not mentioned anywhere in the case if the consideration has been given for the importation of services and that is not in the course or furtherance of business. Okay, yes. So please keep it in your mind as it is very important. Now the next point which we are going to cover is the schedule number 2. That is the activities, the particular activities which will cover either a supply of goods or supply of services. So let's talk about it. Students, whenever you are doing the schedule number 2, I am telling you one formula that is a memory technique also. Please keep it in your mind and you will be able to solve it the complete schedule number 2 very easily. Let's talk about it. So students, if there is supply, if there is actually the transfer of title means the ownership. Okay, if there is a transfer of title, that is ownership, plus transfer of possession, that is now the another person have the right to use that thing. So if both the things have been done, so we will say that there is a supply of goods. Okay, but if there is only a transfer of possession, it means the title and ownership have not been given. That is, for example, in the case of rent, possession have been given, but not the title or ownership. The owner is actually the owner, not the. They have not transferred that right to any person to get the title or ownership. So in that case, it will be considered as supply of services. Okay, so it means if both the conditions have satisfied, that there is a transfer of title or ownership plus transfer of possession, so it will be covered under goods category. Or if there is only a transfer of possession, so it will be covered under the category of supply of services. Okay, now let's talk about it. So student, the first point which we are going to cover is the transfer. Okay, so in the schedule number 2.1 is there, that is a transfer. So that is the same thing. If there is title, transfer of title in goods, so it will be covered. As title has been transferred, so obviously the position have automatically been transferred. Now, if the person have become the owner, so they have the right to use that property. So this will be covered as transfer of goods. Okay, now students, next point is, in the case of the title transfer, sometimes it happened that there is an agreement in which they have stipulated that we will transfer you the title but on a later date. Why? It means they are saying we are giving you the possession right now, but after 12 months or after 14 months we will give you the title also. Ma'am, what is this case? For example, in the case of hire purchase, so yes, there is no problem. This will also be considered as supply of goods. Many times this point have been asked in the multiple choice question also. Okay, so yes. Next is, if there is a transfer of right or undivided share in any kind of goods, but without transfer of title in goods, it means title has not been transferred, but the right to use the goods have been transferred, so it will be considered as supply of services. Okay. Next point is related to land and building. So now students, in the case of land and building, if land and building have been given for the purpose of lease, that is only a transfer of possession here, not the transfer of title, for the easement or in the case of license, so all this part will be considered as supply of services. Okay. Okay. Now the next is, if the person has given it on rent, so yes, it will also be considered as supply of services. Third point is treatment or process. Now, what is this treatment or process? Students, have you ever done that you have taken a piece of cloth and you went to the tailor and you said, okay, just make it as I said you. Okay, so it means in that case, we are supplying, we are giving the goods to the another person and tell them to please do the treatment or process on the same thing. So that will be covered under supply of services, because they are just providing their labor to us. They are just performing any function for us. Okay, they are not supplying any kind of material to us. Okay students, so this is a supply of services. Now the next point is transfer of business assets. This is important. Transfer of business assets. Now students, if any person have transferred the goods to the another person and they said that okay, it is means they are permanently transfer the goods to the another person, it means this is a case of sale of goods, supply of goods. Okay, next is, if they are saying that we have any kinds of goods, if the person have any kinds of goods held for the business purpose and they are transferring it, they are transferring the possession of that goods for a particular time period. For example, students, suppose I have a laptop and my friend needs that laptop, so I said okay, just use it for the 2 days. It means I just give the possession to that person, so this will be considered as supply of services only. Okay. I hope you are understanding all the concepts now. Yes, I'm trying my level best that this revision will be so powerful for you. Okay, now the third point. Student, in the third point, they said that if you are having any kinds of goods which are forming, part of your business asset, this is very important. So please listen it very carefully. So if you are having any kind of goods or any kind of assets which are the part of your business, and now the person who is transferring that goods to another person is ceases to become a taxable person. It means either the person have cancelled the GST registration or the department have taken the GST registration from that person. It means now the person is not a taxable person. He ceases to be a taxable person, means now he is a non-taxable person. So students, in this case, it is mentioned, it is specified in the activity schedule number 2 that if the person now becomes from a taxable person to a non-taxable person, it means previously the person was a taxable person, now the person is a non-taxable person. So on this date, when the person ceases to be a taxable person, all the goods which is a part of their business assets will be treated as supply of goods. And why they are doing this? Because students, when the person is in the business, when the person was actually a taxable person, the person have taken the ITC also, the person have paid the GST to the government also on the supply of goods, but now that process is stopped. So they said if the person has ceases to become a taxable person, so all the goods which are forming part of the goods of that business now become a supply of goods. Yes, but is there any kind of exception here? Yes, there are certain exceptions. There are particularly two exceptions here. Now let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. Okay, so there are particularly two kind of exceptions here. The very first exception which we are going to cover here is that if the business is transferred as a going concern, it means now the another person is going to pay the taxes to the government. So this point, this schedule number 2 point, this point of schedule 2 will not apply. Okay, second is that students, if the business is now carried on by a personal representative and that personal representative of a person is a taxable person, so in that case also government will get their tax part. So no point of schedule 2 will apply here. Okay, now the next case is if there is any kind of renting of immovable property or students. So renting of immovable property means now the person has given the services to the another person. Okay, because there is only a transfer of possession only, not the transfer of ownership. Okay, now let's talk about the next point. Now about the point which we are going to talk about is very important, but it's little bit complicated, so please understand it very carefully. If you have done it in the classes, so I hope you have already know about this. So let's revise it. Students, there is a thing that the goods form. In the case of goods, student, they said that if there is any kind of transfer of immovable property, so this will not be considered as transfer of goods. Why? Because student, in the case of goods, in the definition of goods, section 2 of CGST Act 2017 said that goods will contain only movable property. It means the property which we can move from one place to another place. But can you move the land or building? No. So land or building does not contain the does not become the part of the goods. So what will happen if there is a transfer of land or building? So let's understand about it. Okay. First of all, students, if there is a transfer of only land, so this will covered under the negative list. It means it is neither will be treated as supply of goods or nor will be treated as supply of services. So no GST shall be levied. Schedule 3 will attract here. What will happen in the case of building? First of all, but building is also an immovable property. For sure, building is an immovable property, but in the case of building, there are certain points. Please understand about it. Okay, student. So this particular point is for the building, or if there is any land but that is attached to building. It means it is not a vacant land. It is a land which has been attached, apportioned to building. Okay. Now, so student, in the case if the consideration for that building have been given, the consideration, the important factor, the decisive factor here is the consideration. Okay, so if the consideration for that building, either it will be rupees 10 or rupees 10,000, it will not matter, just some consideration shall be here. Okay, so if any part of consideration for that immovable property, that is for the building, will be paid before the first occupation of that building, And students, if any kind of building have been constructed, so the competent authority, that is the government, provides a certificate, like the certificate of completion of construction, that yes, the construction have been completed and now you can use that property. Okay, so before the first occupation or before the issuance of completion certificate, whichever is earlier, if any kind of consideration has been given before this date, so it will be treated as supply of services. Why, ma'am? Because we are assuming here, it is a memory technique, that if the consideration have been given before these date, so it means now the buyer have said to the seller, just make the property according to me, because I have the consideration, I have paid the consideration before the completion of construction. Okay, but if the whole consideration, that is the complete consideration, have been given after this date, so it will be covered under the schedule number 3. Okay, that is the negative list. Now the next point is, student, please just comment in the comment section that how much you are liking the video. Okay, and yes, share it with your friends also. Okay, now the next point is, just talk about the next point. The next point is regarding the composite supply. Now what do you mean by the composite supply? Section 8 of CGST Act 2017, what we have covered in the composite supply. Composite supply means that if it is, there is a bundle of goods or services or both, and we are supplying it in the as a naturally bundle in the ordinary course of business, so that bundle will be treated as composite supply. Now there are two kind of composite supply which have been mentioned in the schedule number 2. First of all, it is a work contract case. Work contract means where there is a supply of material plus labor, that is supplying both. Second, there is a case of restaurant services, in which also we are supplying the food plus services, that is both. So schedule 2 specifies that these two particular activities will be treated as supply of services only. Okay, yes. Next, students, if there is a supply of goods. Now the next point, if there is a supply of goods, not of the services, supply of goods by any kind of unincorporated association. Which association? Unincorporated association, like the Resident Welfare Association. Okay, so if this is the unincorporated association or body of persons, to any member, if they are providing these goods to any member for cash, they're providing it for cash, for deferred payment. Deferred payment means that you can provide the payment later on, or by any kind of consideration, for any valuable consideration. So it will be treated as supply of goods. Okay, students, so I hope you like it. Now there is an amendment in this point. Before the amendment, there is only a case when the supplier is the unincorporated association. Now the amendment is that it can either be the unincorporated association or any kind of body of persons. Okay, students, great. Now the next point that we are going to cover is the schedule number 3, that is a negative list under GST. I hope till this point all the points are clear to you guys. There is no confusion in these kind of points. Okay, we have covered the revision of the schedule number 1, schedule number 2, that is contained in the section number 7. Now we are going to start the schedule number 3. Now we are going to start the schedule number 3. So is it important? Yes, it is important. And yes, if you want to opt the MCQs of the schedule number 3, so it is available on the app in the free study material section. You can also opt that. Okay. Yes, first of all, students, if you want to opt any kind of test which are given in the free section, so on the app, that is on the IUship in the classes, you can install it from the Play Store also, and link is also given in the description below. So in that, student, there is a section that is a free test. You can join the test from there. Okay. Schedule number 3 specifies about the negative list. Negative list means that these activities will neither be treated as goods nor be treated as services. So if there is no goods or services, so no GST will be attracted. Now the first activity which will be covered in the case of negative list, that is the schedule number 3, is if services have been given, if there is a supply of services by employee to employer. Normally the employee gives the services to the employer in the case of job. So students, if the employee gives any kind of services to the employer in the course of employment, not outside the course of employment, it means in the course of employment, it means what have been mentioned in their contract terms. So it will not be considered as supply of services under GST. This is the main point of the schedule number 3. But yes, if the employee done any kind of service or supplies any kinds of goods outside the course of employment, so yeah, there will be GST. Okay, so main point is it is in the course of employment. Second thing is that if tribunal tribunal obviously which is established under any law, if they provide any services to the any person, so it will not be considered as supply of services under GST. Okay, yes. So when tribunal gives any kind of order, any kind of decision in the verdict, so it will not attract GST. Okay. Third point is, students, now for this point I am telling you a memory technique. If government officials, if government officers do any kind of service for us now, so they are actually helping us a lot, so no GST will be attracted. It means that will not be considered as supply of service under GST. Now there are certain points which have been mentioned in the schedule number 3. First of all, if the functions are performed by MP, MLA, member of Panchayat, President of India, Prime Minister of India, Lok Sabha Speaker, and the other local authorities. It means the post about which have been mentioned in the Indian Constitution. So, functions performed by these government officers will not be considered as supply of service under GST. Okay. The second point here is, students, the second is, if the duties are performed. Now, if any kind of duties performed by those person about the post of which have been written in the Indian Constitution, which is the supreme law of India, so that will be not considered a supply of service under GST. It means if president is doing anything for the public, so it will not attract GST. Third point is, students, if the duties, now this is the new point, if the duties are performed by any person as a chairperson, please understand it very carefully, as a chairperson or a member or a director. In which body? In a body which is established by the government, by the central government, by the state government, by the local authority. And this main reason here is, students, if these chairperson, member or director of any body, and that body have been established by the central government, state government or local authority, so the functions which are performed by these persons will not be attract GST, will not be considered as supply of services under GST. Now, please understand one thing more, that, student, these persons must not be considered as employee of these bodies. Now, why? Because if they are employees, so they will be considered under the point number 1, not under point number 3. Okay. So in both the cases, GST will not be attracted in these cases. Okay, student. Okay. Yeah. Next is, if any kind of service is performed to a deceased person, like the funeral, burial, crematorium, so all will also be not attract GST. Fifth point is sale of land. So as I said you, land is an immovable property, students. So sale of land will not attract GST. That is covered in the schedule number 3. And what will happen in the case of sale of building? So in the case of sale of building, if the whole consideration have been given after the 2 dates, that is after the important date, what is the first occupation or the issuance of completion certificate by the competent authority, whichever is earlier date. So after that date, if the complete consideration have been given, so there will be no GST. Okay, yeah. Now, students, the last but not the least point which we are going to cover it in, that is actionable claims. Now, student, we have covered it in our classes also, that all the actionable claim means that is on which, if that action has happened, so we will get a right to claim that money. Okay, to claim that award. So, students, in the case of actionable claim will not be covered under GST, but yes, if actionable claim is about these 3 terms, that is lottery, betting and gambling. So all these 3 will attract GST for sure. So it means all the actionable claims, even this question can be asked in the MCQs also, that actionable claim will not attract GST, but yes, if actionable claim is lottery, betting and gambling, so these are the 3 exceptions of the actionable claim which will attract GST. Now, student, there are more. For the CA inter level, there are just these 6 points, but for the CMA inter level, 2 additional points have been covered here. Okay, so what are those 2 points? Those 2 points have been related to custom. So when I will revise you, when I will revise the portion of custom, I will cover those 2 additional points of schedule 3 in the custom part. Okay, so I hope, students, you like this session. Now, the last but not the least part of today's class is the revision of the composite and mixed supply, that is the section number 8. Yes, students. So section number 8. Next part is section 8, composite and mixed supply. So, students, what is the composite and mixed supply? Actually, nowadays, all the supplies have been given in bundle. For example, suppose, let's take an example. I go to the market and purchase a mobile phone. So, I am not getting just a mobile set. With that mobile set, I am getting a charger, I am getting a SIM ejector, I am getting the warranty, the user manual, all those things. Now the important point, that on which item, according to which item GST rate shall be attracted. So section 8 solves this problem. Section 8 specifies that please just divide your supplies into two parts, composite, either composite or mixed supplies. What is the meaning of composite supply? Composite supply means that if there is a bundle of two or more things or goods or services, anything, which are naturally bundled in the ordinary course of business. It means all the buyers have a perception to purchase those things, purchase those services, get that bundle accumulated. So that will be covered under the composite supply. Okay, and the sellers have also the same perception. The advertising campaign have also the same perception. So it will be covered under the naturally bundled in the ordinary course of business. It will be considered as composite supply. For example, students, the mobile phone. We all have a perception that when we are going to get a mobile phone, so we will get the mobile set, we will get a charger, we will get a SIM ejector, the user manual, the box in which the mobile phone have been placed, all those parts. Okay, so that is a composite supply. So student, in the case of some composite supply, which item will get the GST rate of which item will attract to this supply? So student, in this case, the one is the principal supply. For example, in the case of mobile phone, the mobile set is the principal supply and all others are the incidental or ancillary supply. So in this case, the GST rate of principal supply will be attracted here. Okay, but in the case of mixed supply means that supply which is not the composite supply. It means that supply which is not naturally bundled in the ordinary course of business. That means we don't have a perception to get it together always. Okay, for example, a person said that if you will purchase a refrigerator, so with refrigerator they said that we will give you the 6 bottle of water bottles. Okay, so this is not a naturally bundled now. So in this case, student, if this is not a naturally bundled, so as this is not a naturally bundled, there is no kind of principal and ancillary supply. All the supplies will be considered as principal supply. Yes, all the supplies will be considered as principal supplies. The second example of the mixed supplies, which are very common nowadays, is the confectionery basket. Okay, so this is also the second example. Students, all the supplies are the principal supplies because this is not naturally bundled. Which GST rate shall be attracted here? So student, of all those items, of all those goods or services, the goods or services which attract the highest rate, so that highest rate will attract on the complete supply. Okay, so it means if for example, if in the confectionery basket there are 5 items including that basket, the one rate is 18%, 28%, 11%, 10%, 5%. Just take the random numbers. Okay, so which is the highest rate here? 28%. So on the complete price of that basket, for example, if the basket price is for the 1100, the complete confectionery basket, so on 1100, 28% GST shall be attracted. Okay, students, with this part we have covered the section number 8 in this class. We have covered the section number 7 in this class. I hope you like this session. If you like the session, please like the video. And if you have already liked the video, so please do not like it again, because in that case it will got unliked. Okay, and thank you students. Have a nice day. Please share it with your friends and stay tuned to my channel. I am going to revise the complete taxation part on the YouTube channel and on the Facebook also. Okay, thank you. Have a nice day. Bye students.